to the Darren Show. People, how you doing? How you doing? I'm in a good mood. I'm dancing and I'm singing a little bit in my intro. You get the point. I'm in a good mood. Happy Friday, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the Daily Show. My good friend, Mr. Josh Neighbors. Everybody clap it up. Yay. Woo. Okay, before I get into the interview, it won't be a normal interview. Josh is a very good friend of mine that I met a little over a year and a half ago from Play by Play Sports Broadcasting Camp. Season 2, Episode 1. Go check it out. And we've been in contact literally, I'll probably say almost every day since that point. And so this is just an interview to get to know Josh, and he'll promote his podcast and what he does. So first off, excuse me, Mr. Neighbors, how are you doing, sir? How is COVID life treating you, my friend?
I'm good. I am home in Richmond, Virginia right now. It's just me and the dog, Bowie. He's recovering from shoulder surgery. So I do a variety of audio-based things. Actually, if you listen close enough, you can hear him whining in the background right now. I do 2 podcasts and work for SiriusXM. All those things are audio-based. So the dog is not home during the day because I am doing those things, and he likes to bark and whine. And also during the day at daycare, he can go play with his friends. He's recovering from shoulder surgery, so he's not allowed to interact with the other dogs yet. So he's still home here, making noises, looking sad at me. So that's the state of affairs right now. Other than that, we're doing great, doing well, and I'm glad to be on the show.
We're happy to have you, my friend. Before we get into everything, just give the listeners a brief overview of who you are so they can get comfortable with who you are. Tell them where you're from, what you're doing now, and just some things you've been able to do that help you lead to where you are today.
Yeah, so Josh Neighbors, I host the Locked On Big 12 podcast, the Locked On Nationals podcast. Both of those are part of the Locked On podcast network that's based. It started when David Locke, who is the play-by-play voice for the Utah Jazz on radio, he started it, and it's a pretty big network. I got involved in that January 2020, so it's been around 20 months now since I've been doing it. So 20 months in, I did the Nationals one for basically a year. Then added on the Big 12 about 10 months in. And now here we are. I am still working for SiriusXM, which I started back in I interned for them in 2019. And I now work for them, their college sports channels. Started that also in January 2019. I'm still doing that now, but doing it remotely because COVID has pushed us from our Washington, D.C. studios to most of us are remote still. Some of us are in person. Went to the University of Missouri. Spent four and a half amazing years there. Loved it. Degree in communications. Was a sports director at the radio station there for 2 years. Had a show for 4 years called Games. Produced games. Did all that stuff. Loved my school, MIZ. I know you're an Arkansas guy, and I have a lot of Arkansas people who listen to this. But I'm a Mizzou guy through and through. And then I also went to sports broadcasting camps. My mom is from Philadelphia, so she found the camp at Villanova back in 2007, 08. So I started going back then. I was like 8 or 9 when I started going. And then I went for probably 9 to 10 years. I was a counselor for a couple of years. That was big in shaping kind of my career path. And here I am now at 24, kind of doing a bunch of things that I really wanted to do when I started off.
I'm going to throw different pieces around, so this might not be in chronological order, listeners, but you're just going to have to sit through and deal with it because, hey, you love me and I love you. How did you get involved in Locked On? How did you get in contact with them? And was it something that you initially just jumped on, or were you kind of hesitant with it?
So it's funny. Nash Walker, who he was sports director after me, and 2 years after me, and he's actually a senior now at Missouri. I walked into the radio studio one day and he was recording an ad for Blue Chew, which is a male enhancement pill. And I was like, what are you doing recording a Blue Chew ad in our C studio, our online stream studio? And he's like, oh, and we let people use that for whatever it is. But he said, I'm recording my Locked On Twins podcast. And I was about to graduate at the time. This was October or November of 2019. So I was like, oh, Locked On, is it a podcast network? And he's like, yeah. And they started talking to me, I was like, you get paid for it. And so I knew that I was going into producing and wanted to find ways to continue to develop my on-air skills. So, talking skills, because producers, depending on the show you're on, and most of them really don't say a whole lot, right? They don't have a whole lot to speaking role normally. So I wanted to do something to keep it rolling. And I started with the Nationals. That was a Mets fan, but they didn't have a Mets page. So I started to do the Nationals one. And funny enough, my first season, I started in January 2020. You hear my dog back there. What happened was COVID. So I'm doing basically a ramp up towards the season. But my first 5 months on the podcast, we didn't have any games. So it was a really great test to figure out what to talk about, what fans wanted to hear, and fun ways to do the show when we've had 0 Nationals games played. And, I was obviously I follow the Nationals really closely from Virginia, watched a lot of their games, but really I was not so in depth yet with the team. And so I was really looking forward to watching games as a learning experience, as to kind of, learn more about this team that was trying to repeat as champions, right? And it was really difficult. It was difficult to do, but it was a great experience. And then as things kind of went on, we got to October, the national stuff, was winding down. They had a horrible season. And I was thinking, they had a Locked On SEC page, an ACC page. They already had a Mizzou person, and they didn't have a Big 12. So I was thinking, hey, you work for SiriusXM. I mostly work on their Big 12 channel. Why not ask about that? Mm-hmm. And I did, and I've been doing it ever since October of last year.
How's that experience been for you? Not only the Nationals, but the Big 12 now. And what's been the reaction of the latest OU and UT news within your programs?
Well, I had somebody leave me a 1-star review the other day. It said, wow, this podcast is still going. I had no idea, horns down. And didn't listen to the show, just didn't listen to it, decided to give me a 1-star review. People are angry, Dalen. People are angry and they're upset. My dog is angry right now. He is upset. Everybody was angry and upset about the way things went. And so with that in mind, I'm going to go. Let me go. Freaking.
People, your forehead's looking big. I don't like that. Guys, how y'all doing? Y'all doing good? Y'all doing good? Y'all it was another episode this season. I can't recall. And someone left, and I was just like, let me start talking. You go back to season 1, Dominic James Wright. I don't remember the exact timestamp, but you go back and listen to the episode. And he had to step out of the way for a second, and I just started talking. So, how you doing? How you doing? How you doing? Hope all is well, people.
All right, we're back. He's going to go whine at the door now, isn't he? Unbelievable. Yeah, so people are angry, man. They're upset. They're not happy with what happened. And it's expected, right? I mean, it felt like people kind of the wool got pulled over people's eyes. And so now they're at people are trying to figure out what the next direction is for the conference. And it's been a challenging experience. Yeah, I'd say definitely a challenging experience, but one I've enjoyed, covering one of the biggest stories in college sports. And it's exactly what you want. Obviously not great for the conference in a lot of terms, but it's kind of the story that you want to cover.
All right, I'm kind of going in backwards chronological order here, but just bear with me. How did you, what's the word that I want to put this? How did you get into journalism and sports journalism? Went to Mizzou, talked about your mom kind of found the play-by-play sports broadcast camp, and you just kind of fell in love with that, became a counselor. Where did that love come from? Was just a love from sports, and you were like, okay, I know I'm not going to be a good athlete, so maybe I should try this?
Yeah, kind of. It was never really the athlete part of it. It was never, I had a heart problem. So it was from a young age, it was basically like, hey, you're just the athletic part of it, it's going to be hard. Shaun White has the same heart problem. So it's not to say people with this heart problem can't become athletes, elite athletes. He did. But it's just, I kind of really loved the talking side of it. In 8th grade, I found the Bill Simmons podcast back when it was the BS Report. And I would listen to it while I was studying. It might have hurt my grades a little bit, but I was hooked on it. I couldn't stop listening. And then, I was watching First Take during, I remember LeBron when he went to the Heat, watching First Take and all of those talk shows, listening to ESPN radio, right when he went to the Heat, it was like intoxicating. And so it was just, you just wanted to be involved, and I found myself often talking to my radio, shouting out my opinions, whatever it was. And that, I think, is what really was kind of the thing that propelled me forward. It was like, all right, this is what I want to talk about. This is what I want to do. I started the podcast in high school, and I went with that. But I think it was around that time, probably my around 8th grade, where I was like, I want to get serious at this. I think I can be really good at it. And it's kind of just hearing those, I listened to the Dan Patrick Show, and I love the Herd with Colin Cowherd, not now, but those things got me thinking about different kinds of media and which way I might want to go.
If you couldn't be a sports journalist, what would be your second career path that you would be pursuing?
It'd probably be in politics, to be honest. I think something political would be a lot of fun. Something in politics would be a lot of fun. I think just to be able to be involved in that world. It's such an interesting world. To be involved with that would be something that I think I would really love, but love and hate at the same time.
I love how you just gave your dog the death stare, like give a little cock.
Yeah, he will not stop. He will not stop.
He's all good. Talk about your experience at the University of Missouri. I know that's a once in a lifetime opportunity for you. And again, one of the best journalism programs in the country. Was Mizzou your first option? And again, talk about your experience there.
It was the last place I toured, and so it was between that and Elon, which is in North Carolina. And so I toured Georgia, I toured Clemson. I thought about places maybe like, Florida, but Missouri was the last place I went, which it was in September of my senior year. And I went there and I saw the program, I saw everything, and I loved it. And I loved the idea of getting somewhere besides Virginia and starting over again. And that was so, I love that opportunity so much. I really love the chance to go somewhere else, to start over again, to meet new people. And I really did do that. I really loved it. And it's funny enough, I actually didn't end up in journalism. I'm gonna let this dog out. He's gonna.
People, oh yeah, this is different right here. We got 2 times in the same episode. Me talking one-on-one with you. Welcome, my familia. Welcome. Be a part of this show. You got something to say it right now. Oh, you said, hey, how you doing? Hola, amigo. See, you got that? Yeah, I thought I can do it. Anyways, let's talk about some news. Cristiano Ronaldo to Manchester United. He's back. If you think the Premier League is the best league in the world, you're out of your mind. Welcome back, Cristiano.
What'd you say?
I said, welcome back to the Premier League, Cristiano Ronaldo.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, he is back. That's true. But yeah, so, Missouri, I actually didn't end up in the journalism school. I started off there, and when I became sports director at the radio station, I started my broadcast. It was at the beginning of my junior year. And I started my broadcast classes, and I really struggled managing the workload, which is something I'm grateful for the experience now, but it really sucked at the time. I gotten pretty sick too. And so it was really challenging to manage both of those things. And I had to make a choice whether I wanted to stay in journalism proper or kind of move on. I knew I wanted to do something radio related. TV was not really that appealing to me. So I went to the communications school. I switched over to communications and studying kind of the way how people communicate and why they do and the ways that they do it. And those kinds of things I think was very effective and helpful for knowing audiences. And then I kept doing the radio stuff. And then I started doing TV on the side, calling games on the side, on television on my own. And then also working at the local radio station too on my own. I would not have been able to do those things without stopping my broadcast classes. So while you might go, it kind of shows you might go one way, there's still multiple ways to reach one path. I'm really glad I tried the journalism school, and it's excellent if you want to do TV or print. But for people like me who wanted to do radio, just in sports radio, really, it's not the best program. So I was able to make it work with the other resources there. And that's why I love the school so much, is that even though the classes weren't it, the other stuff there allowed me to really complete my education and give me the tools I needed moving forward.
Do you think, obviously you said you didn't like that TV kind of pursuing that much, but do you think you having even just a little bit of TV background helped you be better at radio?
No, because they really focus on local news, right? So their focus is local news, and there's so many people from Missouri who are successful in front and behind the camera. It's just the focus there is a lot different. The depth in which you get to cover things on TV is not as great as in radio. And so I really didn't have that much passion, desire for it. And in this industry, if you don't, people who do will beat you out for jobs. It just wasn't worth my time because I knew what my passion was, and I wasn't just going to start, spending time on TV stuff and compromise the radio just because that's what the program dictated. So that's why I went a different path.
Going back to Missouri, what did you enjoy the most? Like, was it just being in sports events? Was it, being around friends? Was it just being in your communications program? What you enjoy most about being away at college?
I think the radio program at the radio station, KCOU, really became a family to me. I mean, I was down there every single day. There's a group of people that came down there every single day, and it was their space that they were able to spend between classes. The studio was a workspace, just you can get stuff done, and just the interactions with people. And we dealt with a lot. We dealt with funding issues and potentially, being defunded and all these kinds of things. And, potentially having to move spaces. We really grew as a tight family together as people who had different interests, and whether it be a news person or a music person, everybody had a stake in KCOU, and it was great to have that. And it was created a family, and it also gave me a skill set. That place allowed me to cover UFC events. I was able to cover PGA Championship in St. Louis, watching Tiger come real close to winning right before he actually won the Masters. The following year, I was able to cover NCAA tournaments. I was able to go to the University of Georgia and call Mizzou, Georgia on a Saturday night under the lights at Sanford Stadium. I mean, that place, because of the people before who had built up a good reputation and also the work that we put in there, allowed us the opportunities to do a lot of amazing things. And I try not to take any of the experiences for granted because we got a lot of cool ones as far as student radio goes. We got to go to some great places, and we were treated so well. We were on the road. People could not have been more respectful and nicer to us and treated us like pros. And I'd like to think it's because we acted like pros. And so those opportunities to be able to get some of that field work, invaluable.
Advice question: as a pursuing journalist and other pursuing journalists listening, what advice would you give to people that are trying to, maybe go to one of the top, schools in the country, or try to work for SiriusXM? What advice would you give for them?
Try everything, but at the same time, make sure it has your focus when you try. We tell a lot of the kids when they come in, try everything, try a little bit of the Maneater, the paper, MUTV, the TV station, KCOU, the radio station. But the problem is sometimes, if you have a kid who's doing all three, they're not giving one their full attention, right? So if you're about to call a game that week, that really deserves your full attention. If you're calling, soccer on the radio, and that's what a lot of our kids did. The first game they would call was soccer on the radio. You need to do some studying. You need to study the vernacular. You need to study the names, know everything. You need to study the parts of the field and how you describe them. Think about how you're going to describe, where things are going. You're calling volleyball or football. I mean, football is really hard to call, especially on the radio. So those things need your full attention. If you're going to prepare for a 3-hour show, it needs your full attention. If you're going to write an article, whatever it is, it needs your full attention, whether it be the content, the grammar, the editing, all of that stuff, it needs your full attention. So, have your foot in multiple things, but when you're doing one of them, it needs your undivided attention. Having 3 projects going on in 1 week for different things, not necessarily going to get you where you want to go. So I would say try everything, but try one thing at a time, if that makes sense.
Really good advice. And I appreciate you for saying that. Another, going back to the kind of future thing, is where you are today, are you like, is that just what you're going to do? Are you content with that forever? Or do you want to reach bigger and different things? Or are you just kind of content where you're at right now?
I'm always pushing, Dale. I'm always pushing. I'm always trying to try new things. And right now, Locked On Big 12 expanding to YouTube. So that's been new. I'm going to expand Locked On National to YouTube at the end of the season. SiriusXM, if there's a new position that's open, I'm going to apply for that position. I've been applying for positions right now, stuff that's full time, because right now I'm part-time with Sirius, and obviously the stuff with podcasting is part-time too. And the pandemic has really been difficult because you're away from your bosses and your superiors, and it feels like you're not really on the job learning. It's tough for people to see your progress if you were not in front of them. So this is not what I want to do forever. I want to be on air eventually, but I think I'm somebody that even whatever job I get, I'm always going to be pushing to do something else on the side. Not saying I'm not giving my full attention and time to what I'm doing at the moment, but also, you got to be trying to climb this industry at 24, yeah, you're not getting all the full-time opportunities, but you can push for as much as you can as possible.
I think the best part about you is your grittiness to always get the job done. And then I say this because you gave me a piece of advice a couple months ago, and it was simple, but it just stuck with me. And I was going through a dry slump, and I didn't have any self-motivation. You told me just got to do it, man. You just got to stick through it. Why is it so important in this industry to have self-motivation, and how have you stayed motivated through a pandemic to keep doing what you're doing?
Somebody's going to pass you. Somebody's going to take your spot. I mean, it's why I told people, and Dale, you remember this, when I was giving my podcast lessons, I was telling people to set a schedule, right? Because a lot of kids I talked to, when I was starting to be a counselor, talk about podcasting, especially now, set your schedule and stick to it. Because if you start one, you might do 2 episodes in a week, but then you start fading off and fading off and fading off. So that's why I love the schedule that I have at Sirius and at Locked On. 5 episodes a week in season. And so you got to hit that quota to get paid. You hell or high water, you got to get the job done. And once you start doing it long enough, people start reviewing your work. So you can't just F around and do an episode. You have to do a good job, because people will give you a bad review if you don't. If you slack one day on the audio quality, and people will let you know and leave you a bad review about your podcast and let you know. So, the thing is, like, self-motivation is where it starts. And eventually the motivation from other people and outside that recognition will come to you. And in this industry, if you don't do it, somebody else is going to come take that job, because a lot of people out there want to be in sports. They want to talk about sports, but it's why people like you and young people like I was at your time, if you can learn that then, if you learn the perseverance then, and I got to get the job done and I got to do it right, that is going to help you in the long run. Because a lot of kids who want to do this too, and a lot of people who, there's some people who aren't willing to put in the work, but there are a lot of people who are. And so as soon as you learn how to put in the work earlier on, the better off you'll be.
You talk about reviews and ratings and stuff. How much do you personally spend looking at those things? As you talked about earlier, someone gave you 1 star. How much do you spend looking at those things? And also, do your bosses kind of look at you a lot based on those things?
Yeah. So for the podcasting, I pay attention to it. And especially right now, it's because, I'm lucky enough to have thousands of people listen to both my podcasts. I'm very lucky, but it's been a lot of hard work to get to that point. A lot of episodes with 40, 50, 60 listeners for me. And now, in the last couple of months, last month especially, I had an episode that by itself did nearly 2,000 listeners, which is the most that I've had for a show. And it continues to grow. And I'm really grateful that it does continue to grow. But paying attention is great. Some people have talked about the audio quality in the podcast sometimes. And, I had somebody who said, hey, the audio quality you had isn't great when you have a guest on. So it actually caused me to switch the apparatus, the app that I use for my guests, so I can get a higher audio quality and better balance on my audio. And so, I look for those things. I was at Nationals Park actually 3 weeks ago, and somebody overheard me, and I started talking to her, and she was a listener to the Locked On Nationals podcast. I actually had some constructive criticism, some things that she liked to hear from the podcast. And I was really happy that I got some feedback. So I think it's good if you're looking for feedback and ways to make the show better. I really don't read I should read more of the positive reviews, not to boost myself up, just kind of let you know what people like, why they think you're doing a good job, and especially and try to play to that stuff more often. But you're always going to kind of look for the negative stuff. And I think that's good right now, because at 24, I'm not a polished product, and I want to keep getting better personally and with the shows that I'm doing.
Not even this field, but how important is it to take criticism and you learn from it, no matter what career path you're going into?
Yeah, it's important. My dog refuses to take criticism. He does not take any criticism about how he's acting right now. But it's important to take criticism, and it's important to know when the criticism is, paying attention to people and knowing when the criticism is, where it comes from in the person, right? Is it coming from a place of they're just angry or mad, or is it coming from a place that they're legitimately trying to help you? And then thinking about that criticism and asking yourself, okay, have they made a suggestion about how to fix, or should I ask for a suggestion on how to fix what I am doing? And I think it's really important. That criticism is very important. Not sure why he's losing his mind right now. Why are you scratching? Here, you want to scratch for you? His ear scratched. Someone scratch his ear for him. Yeah, but taking that criticism and knowing where it's coming from and trying to figure out what you can do to adjust. I don't take criticism very well. I used to, I don't think. I used to not take it very well. But now I think I'm a lot better at it than I used to be. On the production side, I do, just because I know I'm not as, I don't pick things up on a soundboard the way I pick things up in a conversation. So I'm more receptive on that end. But like when it comes to my actual content creation, I'm more protective, but I should be less protective. And I try to be, especially with podcasts.
And these questions are kind of based off things that I know we've talked about before, but how important, again, no matter what the career path you're in, how important is it to kind of like watch what you put on social media and everything and what your social media background is?
Vital. I mean, if you gotta be careful, because if you're putting, I mean, we've seen it time and time again now. And this job too, you'll lose a job because of the way you put something on Twitter. Companies don't like to be embarrassed. And people who hired you do not want to be embarrassed by having that happen to you and having that happen to them, because you then represent their brand. So I've gone through my social media and made sure that, 12-year-old Josh wasn't putting stuff out there, because, 12-year-old white kid from the West End of Richmond probably was putting some ignorant stuff online at some point in time. Right. And so going and cleaning that up and almost like looking at the person that you were, it's like, oh my God, I've grown so much since then, is like really good and kind of, helps you keep growing. But yeah, it's important to make sure that you're putting out not a squeaky clean image, but like you want your social media to be honest to who you are. So if it's a bit edgier and you feel like that's who you are and you want to maintain that, that's fine. And if that's really important to you and it rubs business the wrong way, then don't compromise on that, as long as it's, within reason, right? If you're putting the N word on Twitter, it's like, that's not a brand, you're just a racist. So if you think your brand's important and you want to say some potentially controversial things that aren't going to offend people, and I mean offend, once again, within reason, then that's your brand. That's totally cool. But just make sure that you're treating people correctly on social media. I think that's the biggest thing, and not just people you're interacting with, the people you're talking about in your tweets or your Facebook posts, whatever it is.
Give the listeners that aren't too familiar with your shows, give them just kind of like, what's a weekly topic of what you talk about on both of your shows, and also how do you what is the process for you to talk about topics? Is it something that you're just talking about, that you're coming up with, or writers or editors coming up for topics for you to talk about? What is the process for that?
So I'm a big reader. I'm a big believer that your day should start off by reading. The first thing I do for the Locked On Nationals is, I usually watch the games, but I'll go to the Washington Post the next morning, or I have a couple guys that I follow: Mark Zuckerman from NASN, Matt Wyrick, NBC Sports Washington, Jesse Doherty from Washington Post. I go to see what those guys are talking about, especially right now, Valen, with a losing team, right? They're a team that sold off all of their players. So what's the stuff everybody else is talking about? And not just reading and regurgitating an article about how Trace Barrera has made a case for why he should be the Nationals' second catcher next year, but kind of giving your spin on it. Talking about, hey, how the Nationals traded for two catchers, and those two guys, they thought might be the guys moving forward, but this guy Trace Barrera that they have there is fighting for his spot. And I'll talk about what I've seen from him, whether I think he can stick around at the major league level and things like that. Reading, obviously, if there's knowing the storylines is pretty easy to do if you're watching the team every single day. The other night, Josiah Gray, Nats' new prospect, was facing off against Edward Cabrera, prospect just called up for the Marlins. I talked to the Locked On Marlins guy, who's also the Locked On Prospects guy, to say, hey, and I'm not a huge prospects guy, so I said, hey, Arm, what does this matchup mean to you? So when knowing how to defer on something you might not be an expert on, right? I always say, I'm not a prospects guy. I do my best to know. It's difficult when you're covering multiple sports to also follow AAA baseball and track the progress and see how guys are doing. How is this kid's slider coming along? So knowing who to talk to get your listeners into a good spot. I saw Devin Fink, actually went to camp with him. He goes to Dartmouth. He writes for Fangraphs. Yeah, wrote a great article about what's wrong with Patrick Corbin. Talked about spin rate and the usage of his pitches. I was saying, I've watched Patrick Corbin. I'm kind of talking about the eye test. Well, let's hear the analytical side of things. So just doing your due diligence and reading can really help you reading is something that people say writing is important to everybody. And I agree, but being a good reader, literacy is important. For the Big 12, I go to actually r/college football, which is Reddit. Go there every single day and see, because they always have, whatever the hot story is will be up. And then I also go to The Athletic. Max Olson has been all over this Big 12 expansion story. So I've been reading a lot there and using that stuff. Today, I just used it, actually, the video I recorded before I was on here to talk about the Big 12, looking at BYU, Boise, Cincinnati, and Memphis, talking about that. And, because I don't have those sources. So knowing when other people have them and not just, once again, regurgitating it, but also giving your own spin. So during a game week, though, for Locked On Big 12, Monday, it's a recap. Tuesday, it's kind of some tidbits cleaning up from that week. The third day is kind of look ahead, maybe an interview. Thursday is, a beginning to a preview. And then Friday, also previewing, finishing things off and looking forward to that weekend of action coming up. So that makes it pretty easy. And when the Nats are in full swing, you are talking about the games every single day too. So the process changes based on what time of year it is and what the news is at that point.
I kind of want to wrap up because I know we're short on time. I know you have to go eventually. I want to give you a little bit of time, but I like to do this, and because I think it's the biggest thing, a part of what we do as a living is what's the legacy we're leaving behind once we are gone. So what is it that you want to be remembered for? What do you want others to know about you that maybe you didn't get to exemplify that much about yourself?
Well, the one thing I've always tried is I wanted people to really love. I guess, maybe it's almost selfishly, but if I was involved in something, I really wanted people to love it as much as I did. And so when I was in high school, one of our good friends, David, his mother had cancer. And so we actually started the wiffle ball tournament for cancer research and to raise money for it. And we had a tough time the first year. It was really difficult, but we ended up raising roughly $2,000. The next year, $10,000. And it kept on growing after that. But the event is gone now. I don't think it's actually not happening anymore. And people stopped reaching out to me afterwards. And so it was one of those moments where I was like, man, I thought we built something really cool and impressive there. I really we kept it going, but people don't share that, I guess that love for the event that I had. Then I went to college, and it's the same thing with the radio station. I really think I kind of made it a big point. And our cast and crew, it grew. I mean, when I was a freshman and sophomore, we didn't do every sport. By the time I left, we did every single game. Every game we did was covered. We made it a point of saying, football, hey, if you're a wealthy kid from the East Coast, and you can afford it, it's kind of sucked because we used to pay money for trips. I thought everybody should have an opportunity to go travel places. But hey, if you're willing to drive to Florida for 17 hours, great, because I wanted to have us cover the game in Gainesville. Going to South Carolina, and some kid's dad was willing to fly in there, great, we should take advantage of that, because I think we all took pride in the fact that we did every game for football. We did as many as we were allowed for basketball. And so I take pride in people really wanting to build something pretty special at every single level. And I think that's the legacy, is if you focus on building that thing at the time, once you look back on it, you're going to feel good about it and what you did and what you built. And I feel so good about what we accomplished at Mizzou and the radio station. I love my time there, and I think it really did help a lot of people out too. So legacy is just, in the moment, building and being as good as possible. And then hopefully looking back, feeling like you didn't make too many mistakes. And if you did, feeling like you learned something. So I think just having as many people join me in my personal journeys as possible, I think.
I appreciate that. And if you realize it or not, you are leaving a good impact and a good legacy on people. Appreciate so that. You keep on doing what you're doing. I want you to promote your podcast. So tell them where you can find them at so they can listen to.
Yeah, you can find me and once again, I apologize to the dog. I couldn't hold him on. It's just the time of day is menacing. At LO_Nationals on Twitter for Locked On Nationals. At LO Big 12 for Locked On Big 12. Wherever you find your podcast. You can find me on Twitter at Josh Neighbors _ and Locked On Nationals, Locked On Big 12. It's on Twitter, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Stitcher, all those places. And now Locked On Big 12 is on YouTube as well.
Should you? Any shout outs you want to give to anybody?
Shout out to you for having me on, because I really appreciate it. I love talking shop with you.
Always, man. And how about those Gunners? No cap.
Yeah,
no, I want to. Let's not start this.
Weekend.
I don't know why I said that. Let's not start this. I appreciate you, my friend, because I know we've kind of been trying to conflict our schedules and get this working. So I appreciate you for coming on and spending a little bit of time with us. And you keep working hard, man. We're tuning in at all times. Keep working hard, man.
Anytime. And you do as well, my friend. You do as well.
Always. Listeners, y'all keep working hard as well, man. I hope this episode gave you a little bit of laughter. The dog gave me a lot of laughter, and Josh's death stare to the dog. I'm kind of
not as much laughter on my end, Dale. Not as much laughter on my end.
Yeah, but I mean, it's for the listeners. It's for the viewers,
Yeah.
Josh. So you know, we got to take it advantage. But we appreciate you guys for tuning in with us, everybody. God bless and stay safe and keep working hard, everyone. All love.